Glen Campbell shot his wife with a gun in the 1980s because he was high on drugs. It was in fancy places that he threw chairs. He took off her girlfriend's dress in public. But that's not even the worst part. No one talks about the bad side of the country star who sang Rhinestone Cowboy, fights, cocaine binges, and an incident that is long forgotten but almost killed him. He had a secret friendship with Elvis Presley, which was even stranger. It might have saved his career. Today, we tell you the shocking truth about the man who was lying to the American people for decades. Glen Campbell was born in this small Arkansas town on April 22, 1936. It was so little that most maps didn't even show it. His family had very little money. During the Great Depression, they were cotton farmers who were just getting by. Life was hard for Glen from the start because he was the seventh boy out of 12. You couldn't get power or other nice things. You had to work hard and spend long hot days in the fields. Glen picked cotton for nearby farmers when he was a little boy. He would sometimes make just over $1 for every 100 pounds. You got blisters on your hands and back from that work. But it was what the Campbell family did to stay living. Glen almost drowned in the Missouri River one time. Everyone thought he was dead when his lips turned blue, but his brother Lyndall brought him back. Glen will always remember that moment. He thought God had saved him for a bigger purpose. When Glen's dad saved up $5 to buy him a guitar, everything changed. It was a huge sacrifice, but it made the boy want to do more. Uncle Boo helped Glen learn to play the piano faster than anyone thought possible. It didn't matter that he couldn't read music. He had a unique ear. He became crazy about Django Reinhardt's music and saved all the money he could to buy his records. He would practice every note and beat for hours on end until it sounded just right. He had found something powerful by the time he was in kindergarten. Lots of people, mostly girls, paid attention when he played his guitar. Glen's first radio show was when he was only 14. A local Arkansas station, KLCN, had him play live. He played country songs with a jazzy twist. He quit school in the 10th grade and wasn't long before he was ready to pursue singing full-time. He went all the way to Indiana with a group of foreign workers who were picking tomatoes. It wasn't nice to sleep in barns, getting work done in the sun and playing guitar by flashlight. But then Uncle Boo called and told him he could join his band in Albuquerque. Glen didn't think about it. Glen got more radio spots and steady gigs when he moved to Albuquerque. He finally made his own group, which was called the Western Wranglers. As they worked hard, they played almost every night in small clubs and honky-tonks in New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas. Glen didn't know about fame. He loved to play so much. He played guitar in a unique way, putting together country, jazz, and rock. Some people began to talk. His standing got better. Glen did something risky in 1960, when he was only 24 years old. He drove to Los Angeles with $300 and a dream after leaving the Wranglers behind. He slept on couches and sometimes in his car because he didn't have a place to stay. But within a year he got a job with the Champs, the band that made the hit song Tequila. It wasn't much, but it was something. He soon got a job at a music publishing company, where he wrote songs and made demos. At that job, he met studio players. By 1961, Glen was a member of the exclusive group known as the Wrecking Crew. That team made a record for everyone. Glen played bass, guitar, banjo, and mandolin on a huge number of songs. In 1963 alone, he played on more than 500 records. Glen played guitar for famous people like Elvis Presley, Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra, and the Beach Boys. But most people didn't know it. Artists who were there saw the magic, though. That he was the best musician Leon Russell had ever heard was made by him. Glen only had to hear a hard piece once to be able to play it back correctly. There is no written music, only ability and gut feeling. In 1966 he was most proud of himself when he played guitar on Frank Sinatra's Strangers in the Night. Sinatra was known for being picky, but Glen made him like him. While they were recording, Sinatra gave him a rare thumbs up, and Glen will never forget it. At about the same time, Glen stepped in for Brian Wilson while the Beach Boys were on tour. He had to learn tricky bass lines and vocal choruses on the spot. Glen did it, even though it wasn't easy. He also played guitar on some of their most famous songs, like the memorable beginning of Fun Fun Fun. Glen stayed stable, even though he had a lot going on, like radio shows, studio sessions and live shows. He knew where he came from. It was 1956, and Glen Campbell was only 20 years old. He was trying to find his place in music. He went to Albuquerque to join the Sandia Mountain Boys, his uncle's band. Everything changed one night. He went to a neighborhood fair to see Elvis Presley, who was becoming a big star. Elvis wasn't always so well-groomed like he is now. He was rough, wild and hot. He only had a simple band with him, but the spirit was strong. Glen was speechless. He later said it was like seeing something really cool. Something clicked that night. It made him feel like he was seeing the future of music, and it will stay with him forever. In 1960, after a few years, Glen was in Los Angeles. They are trying to get a job as a session player. He was hired to play regularly at the Crossbow, a small club off of Van Nuys Boulevard. It wasn't fancy, but there was a quiet area upstairs where famous people could sit without being seen. That's where Elvis first showed up. He would go with his close friends to see Glen act, and would sometimes talk to him alone, to tell him how impressed he was. Because the owner knew people in show business, it became a hidden spot for stars to hang out. For Glen, it wasn't just about making music, it was about connecting with people in a real way. He was no longer just a fan of Elvis. He was a fan. Glen's work was taking off by the middle of the 1960s, but he was working on something strange behind the scenes. From 1964 to 1968, he made 18 demos that were definitely made for Elvis. These weren't just rough drawings. Full studio recordings were made so Elvis could listen to them and maybe record himself. Glen could sound like almost anyone, and in these tracks he sang like Elvis. John Cash once told Glen's boss that he could sing like Cash. No matter who you wanted, Johnny Mathis. Elvis recorded 12 of those songs in the end, and some of them were used in his movies, such as Clambake and Spin Out. No one knew about these tracks for a long time until they were finally put out on an album called Sings for the King in 2018. Glen and Elvis even sing together digitally on that song. The fact that they worked together in silence showed how much Elvis trusted Glen's sound. Another event took place in 1970. Fans still talk about it, even though it wasn't caught on tape. In Las Vegas, Glen was making his debut at the International Hotel. At the same time, Elvis had already begun his famous run of sold-out shows there. In Elvis's hotel room one night, Glen, Elvis and Tom Jones played music together alone. They hung out and played whatever game they could think of. The only sound was music. There were no cameras or mics. They played for 2 hours and then stopped. Everyone who heard about it says it was amazing, but nothing was caught. It might be better that way. It stayed clean. Elvis was getting together a new band at this time. It was called the TCB Band. It was clear that Glen Campbell would be a great choice for lead guitarist. Glen and James Burton were the only ones still in the race. Even though Burton played with Ricky Nelson, Glen was now a big star in his own right. It was hard for him to stop with hits like Wichita Lineman and By the Time I Get to Phoenix. He also had his own TV show, Friends All Over the World, and a lot of energy. Glen said no to the offer. Even though he really liked Elvis, he had to make a tough choice, but he decided to keep working on his own job. And James Burton got the job. He changed the sound of Elvis's live shows in the 1970s, but Glen's choice to turn down the offer turned it into one of those what-if times in music history. Glen Campbell didn't become famous right away. Turn Around, Look at Me, a soft ballad, was the first song that played. In 1961, he was only 24 years old when he made the record. The song didn't do very well in the US charts, but it did well enough in Canada to get people's attention. Capitol Records saw him and signed him in 1962. The big break didn't come right away though. Glen was stuck in a weird place for years. He was a great studio guitarist who played for the world's biggest stars. While singing by himself, he wasn't getting anywhere. Capitol Records almost gave up on him. In 1966, they were ready to let him go. After that, something changed. Capitol gave him one last chance by putting him together with Al DeLory, a director. It was risky, but it paid off. Burning Bridges, their first song together, was a small country hit for Glen. There was real magic in Gentle on My Mind though, the first one Glen heard on the radio. He loved it and made a tape with some friends who were musicians. DeLory made that demo sound better and better without telling Glen. It wasn't the #1 song when it first came out. It didn't even make it into the top 30, but it touched a nerve. 4 Grammys were given to it, and Glen became known in a whole new way. Something much bigger began because of that song. Glen began working with a young musician named Jimmy Webb around that time. Webb was a trained musician who could write powerful songs. Glen came from a very different world. He was born and raised in rural Arkansas and learned to play the guitar on his own. But something clicked when Glen sang Jimmy's songs. By the time I Get to Phoenix, their first big hit, was liked by both fans and reviewers. Then there was Wichita Lineman, a song about a Midwest phone worker who is lonely. It turned out to be one of the best songs ever recorded, which no one saw coming. They then had another hit with Galveston. Each song had the right amount of rhythm, voice, and feeling. Jimmy gave Glen a level of artistic depth he'd never had before, and Glen made Jimmy's hard songs sound easy. Things kept going well. Glen won Entertainer of the Year and Male Vocalist of the Year awards from the Country Music Association in 1968. In the same year, his album Wichita Lineman dethroned Jimi Hendrix as the best-selling album on the Billboard 200, staying ahead of the Beatles' White Album. He was no longer just a country singer. It was impossible to miss him in the music world. It was clear that he had global appeal. One night he might play with country stars, and the next night it might be pop stars. Then CBS called, as a fill-in for the Smothers Brothers in the summer of 1968. Glen was first hired by CBS to lead their comedy show. People loved him though. He was easy to get along with, had a friendly smile, and everyone knew his voice. The network gave him his own show, which was called the Glen Campbell Good Time Hour. It came out in January 1969, and was a big hit right away. There were big budgets, big guests, and a big crowd at the show. Anyone who was famous wanted to be on Glen's show, from Ray Charles to Cher. In fact, Steve Martin and Rob Reiner both wrote comedies for other people. Glen was no longer just a singer. Several people saw him on TV. He got a chance to be in movies because he was so good on TV. His first movie role was in The Cool Ones, a strange and disorganized attempt at a youth show. It didn't do well, but it was Glen's first movie. After that came True Grit. It was important this time. He was in the movie with John Wayne, in the role of LaBeouf, a young Texas Ranger. The movie was a big hit, but critics didn't say much nice things about Glen's performance. John Wayne even won his only Oscar for it, and Glen took home something too. He sang the movie's theme song. That song went up the charts and won him a nod for an Academy Award. It was also another hit for him. Glen Campbell's love life became so wild in the early 1980s that it could not be controlled. It was more than just a relationship that he had with Tonya Tucker. It was moving chaos. Glen was 40 years old. Tonya is only 19 years old. It wasn't their age though. The drugs, the fights, and the violent outbursts were to blame. He is said to have thrown a chair across the room in a fit of anger one night at a fancy restaurant in Beverly Hills. Tonya is said to have hit him so hard another time that she may have broken one of his ribs. It didn't end there. Glen wrote in his book that Tonya tried to cut her wrists while she was high on cocaine. It was so dangerous between them that even their families got involved. Fights broke out like in a bad western, with chairs flying and tempers running high. After everything was over, Tonya sued him for $3 million, saying he abused her. She did say years later that what they had was powerful and memorable, and it was something she would never feel again. Glen had problems with more than just Tonya though. His drinking and drug use made him act in a bad way that scared the people around him. He once pointed a gun at his wife Kim while he was high on drugs. She said, "That wasn't a one-off event. A lot of fights happened, both in public and at home." What happened behind closed doors was very scary. As Glen and Tanya got into a fight, he tore her dress off in public. He would act out sometimes in places, making a scene that left. He said that cocaine made him happy and alert, but it also made him dangerous. He tried to play it down by saying that he used less than Tanya, but the truth was that they were both going downhill. In 2003, years after the fact, his past caught up with him. He was drunk when he crashed his BMW, then ran away and kneed a police officer while being booked. It went popular that he was taken smiling in an Arizona Diamondbacks shirt. For a man who used to look so good on TV, it was an embarrassing moment. He told everyone that he hadn't drunk since the late 1980s. Being caught showed that he wasn't. Things were not better in Glen's personal life. In his first marriage, when he was 17, he married a girl who was already 15 years old and pregnant. They were married for a short time. He had 3 children with his second wife. He broke up with her in the mid-1970s, not long before getting together with Sarah Barr, his friend's wife. As soon as he was done with his second marriage, he moved in with Sarah. Even his ex was shocked. Glen and Sarah had a son, but their marriage also ended. In a sad turn of events, Glen later did not leave his will to 3 of his children from his second marriage. Some of them said they weren't even allowed to visit him when he had Alzheimer's. His $50 million fortune caused his family years of pain, which they had to deal with in public after he died. The scars he caused didn't go away. They went down even more. It got worse for him on stage, as his drugs got worse in the 1970s. Fans had no idea what they would get. Rhinestone Cowboy was hard for him to sing. He mumbled the words and said the band was playing too fast. He forgot whole lines of Wichita linemen in Vegas, made stuff up, and when the crowd booed he kicked over the mic stand. He looked so drunk on TV during a Christmas special that the network had to cut the whole thing together before it could be shown. He was supposed to sing 3 songs at the Grand Ole Opry, but he only made it through half of one before getting lost and confused. Promoters began putting recovery terms in his contracts, but that wasn't enough to stop the damage. He later stated that he couldn't remember whole shows. He had been with Capitol Records for almost 20 years before his fall. The idea was still out there, but the man was no longer in charge. Glen Campbell was losing his fame by 1975. His singing wasn't doing as well as it used to, and he wasn't acting anymore. Not a single critic held back. Some people even said he looked like a cowboy made to chase a fake Indian. Things didn't look good. But one day, as he drove through Hollywood, a song on the radio really hit him. The song was Rhinestone Cowboy by Larry Weiss. It seemed like the words about a performer who was having a hard time but was still hanging on were written just for him. He was glued to the radio. During his show in Australia, he played it over and over. Capitol Records told him to record it when he got back. He did it. Rhinestone Cowboy was a huge hit that went to the top of both the pop and country lists. There hadn't been anything like that in over 10 years. All of a sudden Glen Campbell wasn't back. He was everywhere. Soon after he heard another song that changed everything all over again. This time, Southern Nights by Alan Toussaint was playing at a friend's house. Instead of just wanting to record it, Glen took the record and ran off like a crazy person. Campbell's version was very different from Toussaint's, which was slow and dreamy. He added a cool guitar lick he learned from Jerry Reed and made it into a catchy, happy song. It didn't seem like it would work, but when it came out in 1977, it blew up. It was the #1 song in country pop and even adult contemporary. As for Toussaint, he loved it. Even though it didn't sound anything like the version wrote. It was another huge win for Glen, proof that lightning can hit twice. Since his songs were once again at the top of the charts, Las Vegas called. Campbell became a big draw on the Strip very quickly. It wasn't just music on his shows. They were full-on shows with bands, sets, and lots of acting and acting tricks. He made more than $100,000 a week, and live shows at the Hilton and MGM Grand were packed with fans. Glen was at the top of his game. He could sing, play the guitar like a pro, and mix country hits with smooth pop songs for fans from all over the world. He could buy land and start companies with the money he got in Las Vegas, but later on, problems would eat away at his wealth. Still, those strip nights were great. He wasn't just famous again, he was in charge. It should have been a dream come true when Glen Campbell met Kim Woolen in 1981. She prayed for a nice Southern guy when she was 22 years old and danced with the Rockettes. On the surface, he seemed like a very nice 45-year-old country music star. The first part of their date went well, but as Glen kept drinking, things got out of hand. Kim said he went from being nice to saying rude things right in front of her, which is not what a woman wants to hear on a first date. Kim didn't leave right away like most people would have. She saw more in him. It was broken, but it was also good. She thought that her love could keep him alive. That faith would help her get through decades of heartbreak. It wasn't just rough between them, it was also risky. At one point, Kim said Glen pulled a gun on her while he was crazy drunken rage. Everything changed at that moment, but Kim didn't run away. She thought Glen's soul was in danger, and that he might not make it if she left. She stayed because her faith told her to. She prayed all the time, hoping that God would save the man she loved from his evil. Faith and help weren't enough to get Glen off drugs. Not yet, anyway. After they had their son Cal, things really broke down. Glen said he would leave the cocaine behind, but he broke his word almost right away. Kim was very angry. She said she would leave with their baby and take off. It was the first time Glen knew he was going to lose everything. He went to the Betty Ford Center for help because he was afraid. He was serious about getting better for the first time. The doctors saw something more worrying, early warning signs of brain problems. But Glen didn't give up. In the end, he said it was like Jesus had reached down and pulled him away from drugs. He didn't touch it again, but the drink wasn't done with him yet. Glen got so drunk on tour one night that he locked himself out of his hotel room on the balcony and couldn't figure out how to get back in. It made me feel bad. This man had sold millions of songs and played to packed venues, but now he was stuck outside his own room and couldn't do anything. Kim felt terrible about it. She had tried to hide the worst parts of Glen's problem for years, but this was different. It wasn't just a bad night. It was clear that things had gone completely crazy. She knew she couldn't help him. God was the only one who could. Hawaii was where it all came together. August 1986. Glen hit rock bottom. He finally broke when he woke up from the worst hangover ever. He gave up that day. This time for real. After that he never drank again. He walked along the rough path. This part of Glen Campbell's journey with Alzheimer's wasn't easy to understand at first. It started with a small sign, missed lines, and times that he forgot about. His wife Kim noticed long before doctors said it was real. Glen laughed it off at first and called them part-timers. He still had good days, so it wasn't Alzheimer's. For a while, people thought that his memory problems might have been caused by his past drug and alcohol problems. But by 2009, when Ghost on the Cam was being recorded, even Glen started to think something wasn't right. It wasn't just words being lost, it was more than that. The doctors finally told them the truth in 2011, ending the guessing game. They didn't try to hide the fact that Glen had Alzheimer's. Instead, they told everyone it was important for people to know what was going to happen, especially since Glen was about to leave for the last time. The planned length of that final trip was only 3 weeks. Instead, it turned into a 150-show trip around the world. Fans didn't just come to hear the music, they came to see a star fight against time. Glen would sometimes get lost on stage and have to repeat things or ask his kids, who joined his band, for help. But then he'd pick up his guitar and play solos that sounded like nothing had changed. The tour wasn't just a farewell, it was a reminder of who he was. He played at Carnegie Hall and the Hollywood Bowl, and every night the music never stopped, even if the words did. After that, the last song came out. It was the most powerful thing he had ever written. The idea for "I'm Not Gonna Miss You" came from being completely honest. Glen said, "It's not like I'm going to miss anyone after another long day of talking about his illness." That one line, though, became the song's main idea. He wrote it down slowly, line by line and word by word. His memory was already getting worse, but the feeling was still strong. Didn't lie about anything. "I'm not going to miss you, and you're the last person I will love." It hurt, was real, and had a lot of power. The song was up for an Oscar and got a Grammy. Tim McGraw sang it at the Oscars to remember Glen. Aside from the prizes, it gave a voice to something that millions of families go through every day. While everyone was sad about Glen's death, things got really bad behind closed doors. Randy and Debbie Glen, two of Glen's children, sued Kim in 2015. They said she kept their father alone and wouldn't let them see him while he was in hospice care. Things turned into a full-blown family fight after Glen died in 2017. 3 of his 8 children were left out of his will, which was made years before he was identified. All of them were from his second marriage. It was said that the estate was worth $50 million, but it turned out to be worth just over $400,000. Not much money left, just a few small bank accounts and a share in a business. Fans were shocked. Some family members couldn't figure out where it all went. Kim said it wasn't her choice though. She said Glen made those decisions a long time ago, and she wouldn't go into details because she didn't want to upset him.